Hi, Steve Stahlberg here with monthly painting video number 58, made in Kuala Lumpur, October 2018. This month I put on my astronomy and sci-fi geek hat. Here are some references here, and I'll start sketching. I'll talk more about what this is as we watch the sketching process. Yeah, it's about a binary star system. That means two stars orbiting each other, and about something called the Chandrasekhar Limit, the maximum mass of a stable white dwarf star, which, if you're curious, is about 1.4 times the size of our sun. So white dwarfs are slowly dying remnants of suns like ours. If they're left alone, if they continue to age without any mass being added to them or whatever. But if mass is added to them somehow, like for instance in this situation we'll see here, and it gets more mass than that Chandrasekhar limit I mentioned, it collapses further, gravitational pull and all, into a neutron star or even a black hole. With also at the same time with a massive explosion called a 1A type supernova. That's the most common type of supernova. So here you see the background. You see I'm going to put the two stars there, one bluish white and one red giant. This is the background here. So this binary star has one white dwarf, as I mentioned, bluish white, because white is boring anyway. But yeah, it's I'm imagining it's a bit hotter, so it'll be more blue, and the red giant obviously is red. So the white dwarf being the more massive and dense, even though it's smaller, because remember it's the size of our sun, but it's shrunk down to the size of our Earth. And the red giant is very loose, how shall I say, flimsy, not dense at all, the opposite of dense. I can't find the word right now. It's expanding to beyond its Roche lobe even. You can look that up. I don't need to explain it right now, but that means that it's gotten too close to the other one. It's gotten too close to the white dwarf, and so the white dwarf has started to suck mass out of the red giant. And yeah, basically that's it. The mass that the white dwarf attracts into itself is putting it above the Chandrasekhar limit, which means kaboom, supernova. And the interesting thing is they estimate 1/3 of all star systems in our galaxy are binary, or more than binary, multiple. Most of these are bigger than our sun, and half of them could harbor habitable planets. So that means, all taken together, that the view in my image here that I'm painting right now might actually not be that unusual in the galaxy. Yeah, basic colors of the background, red and blue, and here it's the pose of the figure in the foreground, looking at the suns, wondering what destiny holds for her. Well, she probably knows, because she's part of a fairly advanced society. They probably all know what's going on with those stars, and the fact that she's still there, that she hasn't escaped, is probably because for some reason she's unable to. There's no way that she can escape the coming supernova explosion. I don't know the time frame, but I guess it could be years, it could be months, it could be decades. I have no way of knowing that myself. Maybe she knows. Maybe she knows exactly how much time she has left, and she's indulging in hedonistic lifestyle, like with a drink and the robot servants serving her every need and so on. And it's a fairly balmy, pleasant sort of climate here. I'm not sure, but I think she's outdoors, unless there's like a glass in front of her. But I think she's actually outdoor on some kind of high building, palace even, maybe, with some wafting curtains there on the left hand side, on a nice soft bed, or bed-like surface, a couch with some nice padding on it or whatever, because she's not wearing any clothes. So that's how I know it's a pleasant warm temperature. Anyway, we're seeing an accretion disk as well. Not right now. You'll see that when we get up there. Right now I'm putting one sort of bluish highlight on one side and one sort of reddish highlight on the other side. Just sort of making the best of the situation, maximizing the use of different colored lighting options that I have here. But the accretion disk, yes, we will be seeing it edge on because it's in the plane of the ecliptic, and this is for all you other nerds out there. If you don't understand what I'm saying, never mind, I'll get back to the painting soon, but I just want to explain that this accretion disk is spiraling. It's a spiraling donut shape that emits high energy plasma jets. The white dwarf emits plasma jets coming out of the north and south poles, which you will also see. I haven't painted those yet, but I'm just warning you that they're coming. And yeah, the whole thing might be emitting a bit too much X-rays for her to be alive, but yeah, let's not worry about minor details like that. Let's just say that she has some kind of force field that can protect her at least from some X-rays, but of course not from the supernova. Yep, kind of calm pastoral scene. I'll even add some birds later, you'll see. A nice white flock of birds, which is always calming and pastoral. The suns are the main light source, so all this light here you see here is coming from just those two suns. Nothing else. Some bounce light from the sky. The bounce light would be purple, I'm imagining. That's why the ocean and the sky is mostly purplish, because, you know, the red and the blue is mixing into purple. Here I'm creating a tray, kind of metal tray for the robot to be holding, and a drink. So I'm using construction lines on a separate layer for the drink, kind of like a martini type glass or margarita type glass. I don't know, I could have been more imaginative with the glass, but I considered the actual drink color glowing green. I thought that was imagination enough. I mean, sometimes you don't want to go overboard with really strange things happening all over the place in your image, you know. So yeah, I started by putting the green in a little bit too many places, because actually, and erasing it away in some places, and because that's what happens when you put something in a glass container. The color bounces around and spreads, so the liquid doesn't actually go down into the stem, but the light of the glowing green will go down into the stem, like you see here. And yeah, basically painting glass is not that difficult. The tricky part is placing the highlights. You have basically three tones at your disposal, and the tricky part is where to place those three tones. The middle tone will be just slightly darker than the background, which you see, that's the one I started with, just a little bit darker than the background, and then you have two more tones, which is the white and the black, basically. In this case not full black, but anyway. So you have to study, you may have to study glass in real life to kind of get the feeling for where to place these, but the highlight is fairly easy. You place it in a similar way to what you would on a solid surface, but you also have to add the highlights on the take into account that it's a transparent surface, and the light rays come in through one side and go out through the other side. So there are two highlights you see on this glass. Along the top rim there are two places where there are glowing highlights, and also on the bottom, on the foot of the glass, there are also two places where you have these highlights. And now the shadows are trickier to place. You often get them at the edges of the glass because that's where it's thickest, but not always, it depends. So yeah, you have to study. One thing that helped me was rendering in 3D with ray tracing, and with enough bounces on the ray trace, and if you model the glass correctly and apply the material correctly, you will get a fairly physically accurate rendering. And so you can move the light around yourself, and you can, as it's rendering, you can try to predict what it's going to look like, but then when it's done, you can zoom in and really look closely at all the parts, and you can make minor changes to your material and minor changes to the refractive index, for instance, like 1.5 for most glasses, but you can make tiny tweaks to that. You can make it into diamond. It's interesting. That's 2 point something, I think, 2.1 or whatever. Or you can make it like water, 1.33 something, if I remember correctly. And you can have lots of fun with that. And it teaches you how to render glass, even in 2D. It helps. I was into that stuff for many years, way back. And you just saw me put similar ellipses on the robot. The robot is a circular robot, and his cylindrical shape is congruent with the tray, so to speak, so that I can use this exact same ellipse that I used for the tray to put on the robot. Just the same ellipse, just resizing it in different sizes. Once you find a good ellipse, you reuse it to be consistent. Unless it's much higher, closer to the horizon, then of course it has to become thinner, more eccentric, as they say. Or if it's much lower, then it has to become fatter and less eccentric. And here I'm doing construction lines for these plasma jets that are coming out of the white dwarf. As the material is falling into it and colliding with each other and just getting sucked into this enormous, gigantic gravitational well. And this is the accretion disk, which works like the Milky Way. It's like a spiraling, flattened disk shape, and so it will tend to darken the light that tries to come out from the sun. It's blocking that light a little bit there, so you get a darker line in the middle of it. Probably, I'm just guessing. This is all guesswork. I have no idea if it would really look like this, but it's my best estimate. Anyway, I made them a bit smaller there. They were way too big, and yeah, checking that they're still rectilinear, 90-degree angle. And all this construction I'm doing here, now I'm constructing the shadow. This could all be dispensed with if you model this scene, you block it out in 3D. That I would actually recommend doing that. I didn't do that for this one because to me this one was like, intermediate difficulty. It's not it's not like a spiral staircase or a complex shape like a ship, an upside down ship or a spaceship. Or the robot is slightly convoluted, but basically because I'm not showing everything of the robot, I'm just using ellipses to hint at its shape. It was a bit of a cheat. So even a robot was fairly easy to make. And I'm adding a rock here in the background. The rock also, there's no perspective to it. It just sits there. It's fairly flat looking piece, and I want it to be flat. I don't want it to be two-dimensional. The girl is very dimensional, so that's enough for now with the dimensions. There is not too much depth in this painting. There is some. I think there's like basically 2 layers, foreground and background. There could have been more, but perspectively speaking, it's fairly easy. It's not advanced. I would say intermediate or even beginner, because even the bed is not, there are no important perspective construction lines needed on the bed either. And here I am using distortion on the Red Giant. I'm using the displacement filter in Photoshop. First I made a stripy noise, and then I saved it out into a separate Photoshop file, and then I applied it as a displacement, and then you see the effect here. A little bit too strong, so I'm smudging it, I'm reducing it a little bit. Here I added some spots on the sun, some texture, added some clouds in front of the lowest part of the sun, darkening the sky here, using auto contrast and fading it out. Same thing on the sea. Auto contrast first and then fade the auto contrast. I find it a highly flexible way of working. Some tweaking there. I'm gonna add more clouds. I'm gonna add the clouds later in the sky. There's no clouds there yet. I'm also gonna add the waves. The waves are gonna be just noise, just flattened noise basically. The special brush I have called ground texture, which will create flattened streaky little spots, and these are the clouds that I'm starting here, just randomly. I'm imagining two different types of clouds, one a little bit lower, one a little bit higher, wispier. These here would be the lower ones, the darker ones. And then I'm going to add a thin outline to them. Thin, slightly blurry. This is really looks really stupid right now, but what you have to do next is you have to smudge all of these very exact kind of outline, which I'm doing here. This is a fairly nice and quick way to get from A to B, from no outline to some outline, and you can always work on it more, which I will later. You will see some more tweaking of that outline later. Now I'm working on the wrinkles on the bed here, and you can see the birds back there I mentioned earlier. Adding the shadows for the woman here, and yeah, talking about the shadows, note that in this situation the shadow cast by the red larger light, the red sun, should be blue and smaller and blurrier, but the shadow cast by the blue smaller light should be red, larger and sharper, which you can see here on the tray especially, but also on the shadows cast by her arms. Because there are two light sources here, this is a kind of a very complex shadow situation here. But yeah, this scene would not have been hard to do in 3D blockout, so perhaps next time I would recommend that. Yeah, if I could go back in time and tell myself when I'm starting on this thing, I would try that. It would have made it easy also to add some more architectural detail to this thing. I could have added arch, pillars, arches, because I kind of see her as living in some kind of Romanesque palace, or Greek, or some kind of edifice, white marble edifice, something like that. But anyway, I'm still not too happy with these wrinkles on the bed. I do have some new references for these sheets, which I didn't actually find until after I was finished with this project. I realized, oh, I could have googled unmade bed, which I did, and then I found some very nice beds looking better than this one. But here it is anyway, it's done. Hope you like it. Let me know if you have any feedback or questions for this. Thanks for your support, and see you next month.